Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you. Nice to meet with you in this International Humanities Conference. It is the second day of the conference, and it is my pleasure to introduce Professor Evangelos Kyriakidis, Professor of Minoan Archaeology and founding director of the Cultural Heritage Organization. It is our pleasure to have him here and to listen to his stimulating presentation.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting, and thanks for being here early in the morning on Zoom. This is not the talk I planned to give. I was going to be talking to you about something totally different, about socioeconomic development in sub-Saharan Africa through heritage, but I won't. And so I will just keep one punchline from that talk, which is the activist part. We are all working in the humanities, and very often we forget that we have to actually prove that our topics are relevant. And we have to actually make an effort to connect our topics and our very self-indulgent research, which it is, it's wonderful, and make it relevant to other people. So that's my other talk that I'm not going to talk about, because since yesterday, when we had this marvelous talk by George, I just was thinking this may be more relevant to what you might want to hear, or at least to create some more cohesion and structure in the conference. So I'm going to be talking about something that some of you may not have seen before. This is a script called Linear B. It's called linear because it's linear, and B because it's not A. Yeah, and it's found in southern Greece. It's the earliest European script that is found in Europe that we can understand. There are earlier scripts like Linear A that we can't understand, which are earlier. This is from 14, 15, 1300s BC. So let's say Sanskrit times or whatever, or Hittite times. But thanks to this being Greek, and thanks to Greek being a language that has got written evidence just about every period, and it's a very old-fashioned language, very conservative language, you can actually understand quite a lot, and it's interesting for the history of the languages. I'm not interested here for the history of the languages at all. I'm looking at administration and what the script can tell us about the individuals that wrote it. Okay. So, blah, blah, blah. This is southern Greece. This is Mycenae, which gives the name to the period, Mycenaean civilization. This is, let's say, the late Bronze Age civilization. Last third of the second millennium BC. Big Changos burials and architecture, blah, blah, blah. This is the script, okay? Script is syllabic, like Japanese, okay? So approximately 90 characters, and usually one sign for one syllable, so ka, ke, ki, ko, ku, pa, pe, pi, po, pu, etc. Not a very good script for writing Greek, I'm afraid, so probably not made for the Greek language, and probably made for a unknown Minoan language that we don't know, even if it is Indo-European at all. We just don't know. There are some, what you would call ideogrammatic characters, but they're not ideogrammatic. They are closer to Egyptian determinatives for Middle Egyptian. So these are characters that state the obvious in some ways. So if you're counting so many men, it will give you the man determinative afterwards, okay? They have a semi-ideogrammatic function, in that it actually sometimes in lists, it will just show you man and it will mean man, although even if it didn't have it, you still might understand it's man from the context of the tablet. This chap has deciphered it, called Michael Ventris. Different types of tablets. There's 3 different types of tablets: palm-shaped or leaf-shaped. And these are intermediary between the two. This is a palm-shaped, bigger document. This is closer to a leaf-shaped. Leaf-shaped and palm-shaped is important because leaf-shaped means more primary documents. Palm-shaped means it's more final documents. So we have evidence of palm-shaped tablets copying in information from leaf-shaped tablets. Okay, so you can see the bureaucracy moving through the tablets. And sometimes very big page-shaped tablets. Again, these are archival documents. Okay, anything from that size and above are archival documents. Okay, let's say what we would think as final. We don't know if it's final because we have no paper remnants or parchment remnants or whatever. Yeah, but we do know this is advanced in the bureaucracy. Okay, so I'm looking at the West that you can't see. Actually, you can see it's here. This is the palace of Pylos, Mycenaean palace, which has been well excavated. It has a limited number of documents. So we have managed to do quite a lot of analysis by brain, not with computers, okay? But had we had computers, this is a proposal, George. So this is the palace, and you see it's got a central building and auxiliary buildings. The central building is where we imagine people doing things, living, accepting people, etc., which is of a very specific architecture that is repeated in other parts of Greece. So interesting. This is not the earliest buildings that have got architecture. We have architecture from the 3rd millennium, but this is still interesting that this is a form repeated quite a lot. And people in the 70s imagined this a bit like that. It did have wall paintings, painted floors and all that. So this is not totally inaccurate. But people were a bit lighter colored, at least from their iconography, than what we see here. Okay, so when looking at these tablets, people have actually started studying the handwriting styles. Okay, and so they did that by looking at the order of lines needed to make each character. These characters are made on clay tablets that have been very wet in the beginning when made, so they had to be left to dry to become leather hard. Then they were inscribed. So this means you need to make your tablets well in advance, knowing already what you're going to record. So you make an appropriately shaped tablet that will fit what you want to write. Okay, and it's several hours, depending on the weather, of sun drying. So you might want to make your tablets, put them in a basket, and take them recording. And by that time you arrive, they're ready for you to record, and then they can come back. Okay, so there are studies of how tablets fit together in a basket. And so we can find the first tablet at the top of the basket, or say on the left side of the basket, and the last tablet or the first tablet at the other end of the basket, by just matching the shapes of the tablets and then looking at the text on them to see if the text is actually relevant. Okay. So handwriting style, I'm afraid I'm going to use style in several different ways, because the writing implement is called a stylus. Okay, the most secure way of identifying handwriting style is by identifying styluses. What does this mean? It means that the characters really look like each other. Okay. Now, a stylus, it's a name of a category, right? Stylus may well be just 20 tablets out of a corpus of 600, okay? But you may be able to start joining styluses into one hand. This means that these characters that look very much like each other and this group of tablets that also look very much like each other, we have good evidence that they join and they are made by the same person. And so we join these two stylus groups into one hand group. This is just a classification naming, nothing else. So I'm just telling you, styluses are more securely identified as individuals, but sometimes several small groups of tablets join into something that is a bigger corpus, okay? So what can we find? Maybe this is just a start of a list. What can we find about the people who wrote? So we can find from the handwriting style quite a lot of things. And there haven't been exhaustive studies on handwriting style, not computerized, for example. So there are variables that have not been entered, like, for example, how deep you put the stylus in. And like, you know, when we write, we press our pencil or pen in different ways. Every person does. So there is no data for that. Then we have finger and palm print evidence, and I'll go through all these. You have two handwriting styles writing on the same tablet, and then that's interesting. You have the location where the tablets were found. You have specialization, topics that each scribe, each handwriting style is kind of specialized in. Then you can start thinking about the knowledge you need or the knowledge you would acquire by doing this work. Then we can look at character styles and language idioms. Then we can look at tablets and how they're stored in the central archives. We can look at seals and iconography, and then we can even look at their names. So this is the main megaron, and there are various studies that need doing in this megaron, like, for example, airflow. We need to identify how air moves through the megaron depending on how you open doors or close doors, because that would help you identify which rooms are hotter or which rooms are cooler. You won't be able, because we don't have all the elevation, you will never be able to find the temperature, the average temperature in a room. But if, for example, you have a hotter room, it's very unlikely it would be wine storage or a bedroom, okay? Because heat is a problem in this part of the world. So at least in the summer, you would not be sleeping in the hot room. That's almost for sure. And also wine goes bad above a certain temperature. Okay, so look at this. This is what I was talking about. This is a tablet, which is about sheep. Okay, this shepherd looks after so many sheep of this gender, so many sheep of that gender, so many sheep that are castrated, okay, in this place name, and sometimes belonging to this person. So sometimes there are owners of sheep, sometimes there are no owners of sheep. The guy we call hand 21, so scribe 21, writes most of the tablets, okay? And in the final line, you have a whole line deleted, and hand 1 comes and rewrites it. And he also inserts a character. We can see it's an inserted character because it's drier and it's more shallow, the mark at the top. And so much that you cannot actually see it from where you stand. I cannot see it very well from where I stand. And so we can see that hand 1 is correcting the tablet of hand 21 in a document that is quite final, okay, in the archival process. So this means hand 1 is a bigger cheese than hand 21, okay? That's a fairly safe conclusion. Okay, and I've been looking at different people, so I've been trying to imagine them as bureaucrats moving in and out of the palace. And then we have finger and palm prints. Okay, so people have been hypothesizing that the people preparing the tablets and the people writing the tablets are two different people, just because we think of ourselves as academics as too far superior of any manual work whatsoever. Okay, and even archaeology in Greece is done by other people digging. Yeah, so this is quite normal for us to assume. The problem is that there are already 40 scribes, and we already know that there is almost a one-to-one correspondence between the number of people and leaving fingerprints and palm prints and the number of people that we see through handwriting style. So there are two possibilities. One is that there are 80 people going in and out of the palace, or there are 40 people going in and out of the palace. Also, given the number of tablets they have written that we can see, which obviously is just a glimpse, let's say, of a month's work in the palace, are not sufficient. There are very, very few. It's basically less than one book of 200 pages for all of them together, and 200 pages very sparsely written, like they do. Okay, so we're talking about 10 days work. So either this was a very luxurious work, or these are the finger and palm prints of the administrators. Okay, so my hypothesis is that the latter is the case, that these are the finger and palm prints of the administrators. So this means we can find out other things for them. First, we can find the finger and palm prints, meaning the people who prepared the tablets for which scribes. So if us three here in the front, us four in the front, are scribes in the same room, and we have 4 finger and palm prints identified in this room, even if we're writing tablets on different finger and palm prints, this means that we all 4 decided to make the tablets before we write, and then when time came, we shared tablets. Okay, that's actually much easier to conceive than to try and make elaborate arguments of different people just having a specialized job of just preparing a tablet with no specialized knowledge of what they would write in that tablet, right? And then giving it to the posh people who are writing tablets. Okay, so but finger and papillary lines actually are very useful for many things, because you can identify, for example, if this person is doing a lot of manual work. Manual workers don't have have quite abraded papillary lines because they work a lot with their hands. You can find if a person is very young, and sometimes you may make, usually wrong, gender hypothesis, usually wrong. Okay, I mean, if you look at my fingers are like women's fingers, what people would consider women's fingers in archaeology, for example. So you can see from that far away how much information you would have. If that person had a scar on his hand, you'd be able to see it. Okay, so there's quite a lot of information there about who that is, and this is where the hypothesis comes about. The people Anonymous, Mikros, and Rikitikos are people who are preparing tablets, and they are preparing tablets for these 3 scribes in the same room. So the hypothesis is that H22 is Rikitikos, who prepares tablets for all 3. Mikros seems to be H43, and by elimination, Anonymous seems to be H41. Okay, but this is just a hypothesis. Okay, and so here you see H21, whom we know to be a fairly senior scribe, not as a big cheese as H1 as we saw earlier, because he was being corrected, is working with hands 41 and 43, and we don't know how senior they are because we don't see anyone correcting them, so they could be very big cheeses as well. And he's making tablets for all 3. So it's possible that H21 is like a next important scribe, a soon-to-be important scribe, perhaps, that is running a lot of errands at the moment for the others who are more important than him. And this is what I was telling you earlier. Again, another tablet where hand 21 is corrected by hand 1, and one ideogram inserted where hand 21 didn't think this was necessary. Yeah, and he inserted the hand 20, the man ideogram because of consistency and order. Yeah, this is why this seems to have been. And if you see the manidogram here, there's got a wavy line for shoulders. You can see that far. And this manidogram here has got a straight line for shoulders, and that's good enough for us to say this is a hand 1 ideogram, and it's also a correction because it's a shallower imprint. Okay, and we saw that tablet earlier. So we know that the people who are correcting the tablets of hand 21 are only 2 people, hand 1 and hand 2. Okay, so they are definitely bigger cheeses than hand 21. Okay. Now, areas of scribal activity. You see, this is the megaron in the middle, the main palace, and then on the sides are auxiliary buildings. The colored areas are areas of scribal activity. Okay. Now, all the areas of scribal activity, except room 7 and 8, yeah, have got things in them. Okay, they have other things in them, like perfume making instruments, or storage jars, or remnants of arrows, or remnants of inlays of cards, or things like that, or weapons, things like that. Okay, and very often the content of the tablets matches the finds, and more spectacularly in the top right is a wine magazine. It's full of vats of wine, and there are ceilings, so small clay documents that record wine. Okay, so it's very, very obvious. And the different colors represents different groups of scribes. So different groups of scribes work in different parts of the palace that have different contents in them, and again with the exception of 7 and 8, right? I'll get to that. And so there seems to be areas of scribal activity which seem to be specialized and related mostly with the finds of these rooms. So actually quite interesting. And by the way, the airflow would really help us make sure that these are wine magazines, and because we do not find the wine, we find wine storing jars. Yeah, and at the top, the dark blue ones, we assume that these are perfume cooling vats, and we have a lot of perfume tablets. And in room 12 here, we have perfume storage, and we have perfume storage tablets. Okay, so scribes seem to be working in something like offices that are related to the topics that they're doing, except room 7 and 8. In room 7 and 8, you have a lot of scribes appearing because you only have tablets there. There's nothing else. I mean, there is one piece of jar that is assumed to be for recycling, where you throw your clay tablets to go and die. Yeah, and you just have some wine consuming implements. Who said people were not drinking during work? But room 8 is clearly an archive. Room 7 is the entrance to the archive and a working archive. It's where the bigger cheeses would appear. In fact, scribe 1 that you saw earlier only appears in room 7 and 8. Okay, scribe 2 that you saw earlier, the 2 big cheeses that are supervising clearly hand 21. Scribe 2 is found everywhere, and room 7 and 8. Okay, and then in room 7 and 8 there are lots of other scribes that are found either in the palace or inside. Okay, hand 13 is a very interesting small scribe, meaning few tablets written. And his tablets are found, his tablets is not wrong. His tablets are found, because we know his name. His tablets are found above room 6, so above the central room, so the most private room that we have tablets, right? Upstairs. And in the wine magazine. Okay, and his tablets are about textiles. So he's recording textiles at a fairly final stage, and wine. Why? I don't know. But he's recording himself as checking, and his name is Arion. Okay, so he says when Arion gave payment to the workers for their tablets. Okay, and so you see, Arion is working with 2 other styluses, so smaller group tablets that we cannot identify with any bigger group, and they're working together above room 6. Okay, so that's all we know. But because of the areas of scribal activity that I talked earlier, Arion actually also works in the most private room in the palace, which means that he has access to information that nobody else has. Okay, so not only he would know about textiles, interesting, and not only he would know about wine, but he would also know about gossip. Okay, so it is very likely that if any of the scribes was part of the family living there, it would be him. Okay, he's not a high scribe, he is just a scribe, but in a very private part of the palace. Now, we looked at hands 1 and 2. They appear, both of them, a lot in that archival complex, room 7 and 8. They seem to be working there with hand 21, but hand 21 also works with all these other people in the northwestern building, which is here. Okay. So, what are they working on? Every scribe seems to be fairly specialized, but actually, the more high up you are in the bureaucracy, the less specialized you are. Okay, so hand 13 is quite specialized. Textiles, wine, that's it. Okay, some other scribes, just perfume tablets, that's it. Okay, hand 21 works together with hand 1 in the archival complex on sheep holding and recording female workers that are working in the textile industry. So he's looking at 2 different aspects of the textile industry: sheep holding and sheep holding producing wool. Yeah, this is the main product they got out of sheep at the time, not subsidies, as we were saying earlier. And female workers. Female workers are groups of women around the kingdom that are producing textiles. Okay. Now, in hand 1, with hand 1, with hand 2, he's working together on bronze allotment. So hand 21 is not very specialized, but both jobs, if you see, both bronze allotment and the jobs with hand 1 are sheep holding and female workers. They have to do with jobs outside the palace. Okay, so someone needs to go around the palace. Is he still alive? Yeah, no problem. So he has to go and do the dirty work of collecting data, and hands 1 and 2 have to I'm accepting his camera. Have to join. Have to check his work. Okay. Okay, this is the only text you're going to see. These are the worker tablets, and there are different types of worker tablets. And the important thing to look at is the tablets done by hand 21, yeah, Okay, this tablets made by hand 1, hand 23, and hand 13, hand 21, 4 different scribes on the same working group, right? Because we see Apunewe, place name, Eretao means of rowers, Kowo, men, Puro in Pilos, Tinwatiao from Tinos, Iteya, weavers, Kowo, men, Vir, men 5, Kowo 2. Okay, so this means in Apunewe, there are so many men connected to that work group of female workers, rowers. So Apunewe is a port, and their men, the female workers' men, are recorded as rowers in that port, and there are 5 men and 2 probably not full adults working as rowers in that port. Hand 1 records a very simple entry. Same group, Tinwasiya, the Tinian women. How many women? 9. How many children? Kowa, female girls, girls 4. Kowo, boys 3. And Da and Ta, we don't understand, probably supervisors, okay? Hand 21, so hand 1's documents need to take place once a year, something like that. And hand 23's documents, we don't know, but probably the same. Boys don't grow up faster than once a year, and so they wouldn't change their status between rowers and underlings, let's say, in the textile industry. There is clear evidence for the exploitation of the young in the textile industry in Pilos here. Hand 21, however, records exactly the same group, Puro Tinwasiya, so the Tinian women, and records food given to them. Gra is granum, and ni, and I at the end, is pig. Okay, so these are the salaries of the women working. The calculation is that this is 1 month's salary for these people. So these are monthly records. So hand 21 and then hand 13 records the same group above the palace, above the main room. So this is textiles coming in from this group in the upper palace. So you can kind of see how the information flows together with goods, but you can also see that hand 21 is doing the chore of recording the payment, the monthly payment of the workers, whereas hand 1 does the yearly record of how many women and how many children. Okay, so there is clear cooperation between these 3 scribes for sure, definitely between hand 1 and 21, but also possibly with hand 13. And for sheep holding and female workers, both textile industry related, the 2 scribes work together. So this is a map to show you movements in the palace. Every scribe would have different movements in the palace that we know for sure they did, because we know where they left their tablets, right? So if we know where they left the tablets, someone must have left the tablets there. It's very likely it's them. And so these are just to show you that there are some scribes that move a lot around the palace, some others that don't. Okay, so this is hand 2 is everywhere. Sorry, hand 2 is everywhere. This is hand 21 and only appears in the archival complex and in the Northeast building. Okay. And this is hand 13, and I'm showing him climbing the stairs to go upstairs. Okay, so more private. So if you look at the 2 scribes, you can see that they are actually looking at different parts of the palace because of at least the movement that we see they're doing. Now, another interesting thing is that different scribes seem to be using different words with different versions of words, alloforms of words for the same thing. So Some scribes use more old-fashioned. Some scribes use less old-fashioned. First of all, this is an indication of how they see themselves, okay? Because obviously they knew both versions are around. So whatever you choose means that you see yourself in that way. It's quite interesting, a priori. But what's more interesting is that hands 1 and 2 do not use the most old-fashioned versions. They use versions that sound more old-fashioned, but are wrong, okay? So for the Greeks here, it's like Vasiliadou, you know, she would pretend to be old-fashioned and would use all the wrong terms, right? And in fact, if you look at the handwriting style, they use the most elaborate characters that look like ancient, as if I was writing with the Gothic script, my English, yeah? But are not, they're inventions. So the person who was studying the handwriting style had hands 1 and 2 as the most novel of scribes, but when we discussed it further, they were novel in looking ancient. Okay, so the two big cheeses try to assert their authority with their language and the way they write and the way they correct others. This is not the proper way of doing this, yeah? So I won't go into this, but it's fair to say that at least hands 1 and 2 seem to be supervising hand 21. They seem to be working together in different industries. And by the way, something that I will just tell you just to, as a spoiler, hands 1 and hands 2 have got totally different bureaucratic areas of influence. And we can see that, okay, we can see that because hand 1 leaves tablets only in the archival complex, nowhere else. And he seems to be recording everything that's taking place outside the palace, okay? And we actually have his name. Hand 2 seems to be everywhere in the palace and the archival complex. And everybody he's working with is found certainly in the palace and the archival complex. So hand 1 works with people that are only found in the archival complex. And hand 2 works with people that are only found in the archival complex and the palace, but they don't seem to be managing things that are outside. So basically, these two are actually dividing the whole bureaucracy between them. And then 121 seems to be the boy, temporarily at least, the boy for the errands. Okay, so there is things to do for the archival complex, as this has to be a more complete proposal. The archival complex has got tablets stored. So because they have been excavated very well, we can actually reconstruct where they fell from before the destruction. And there is someone who actually, his first half of his career, he was a nuclear scientist. So he actually has developed the mathematical models to unpack the disaster. And in the room to the right seems to be the entrance room where scribes were working at the time of the disaster. And very interestingly, we seem to have tablets stuck together on a table that's not there anymore. And these tablets seem to have, seem to be about furniture and about a meal, big meal. So we actually seem to have a stack of tablets that are preparing for a feast and are recording the sorry, the lights switched off and on, now I have to reboot. They seem to be recording the condition of the furniture before the big meal so that they can be rechecked after the meal, okay? And also we have food receipts used for the meal. Okay. We have iconography. I'm not going to go into iconography, but there is more that we could be identifying. And I'll just go very briefly to say that hand one seems to be a scribe that's recording livestock in different districts. We know that he inspected the kingdom, he gave materials to the Angwet boiler, etc., etc. And all the things that this guy Alxoitas did seem to correspond to the bureaucratic activity of scribe one. Okay, so it's quite fair to say that they're not two people again, but it's one scribe. Because if that is the case, then we can find out more about them, about the property that they are recorded as having, the activities they actually did, and actually have a greater insight into these individuals. Same thing with Arion. And this is a tablet that says, O dasato. Dasato means distributed. Ariwo tarasiya. These words are half, right? So just believe me. Tarasiya is the exchange system where I give you raw materials and you give me finished products. And I expect you to keep some of the raw materials for your own business, but I do expect finished product in return. And this is a common way that the Mycenaean palaces have been working with, let's say, freelancers or semi-freelancers. So these are the things that we looked at in the beginning. There is quite a lot of information that we can extract about these people. And because it is a limited group of people, we're not talking about thousands of people, we're talking about 40. Okay, and it's much safer to make these extrapolations than if it was a much larger group. And of course, there are huge gaps in our data, but there is some data, and that data is of fairly good quality, given that this is archaeology, which is probably one of the worst data quality disciplines in the world. But if it works with archaeology, then it works with everything. So it's actually quite a good test of theories, right? So that's enough. Thank you very much. Do I buzz off back to my seat, or do you want to ask any questions? Okay, fair enough, fair enough. So the question is, do I buzz off down, or do I stay here for questions? I put you all to sleep. Yes, George. Yeah.
Really interesting. And a couple of things. One is that it's amazing how much information you extract, and not only in terms of language, embedded language, but in terms of also in geospatial communication flow. And that brings me to another idea, whether you have tried to model the do simulations based on network analysis. Because I think your data are not really for any kind of stability because even huge, but they're perfect for small scale network analysis studies. So have you thought about that?
No, there are independent little studies. So fingerprints, and this is not all my work, yeah, because this is the work of 100 people. I'm putting it together to make sense of it. So Erik Sjöquist from Sweden has been working on fingerprints. Kevin Pluta from Texas has been working on the archival complex and how tablets fell together. You know, this is modeled. The archival complex is modeled. I have worked on the iconography. Rupert Thompson has worked on the dialect, on language change. So different studies by different people, but now published. So now it is possible to actually bring it all together and do this. So definitely.
Thank you so much. I think you started by saying about the activist humanities, and this is such an interesting way of discussing how far all the power structures that we have today in institutional technologies go. And it was very challenging. I was trying to pull out my knowledge from this, because I had done tutorial in this knowledge, and I studied classes. There was evidence in those tablets, and I'm not going to use the ones that we studied, that there were some light sentences from the Homeric poems. And maybe it was another book.
There is a study. There is a study that some of the Homeric part of the Homeric poems, are more old-fashioned in language than Linear B. So, for the history of the language, we actually have traces, fossil traces that survive into Homeric poetry that seem to be of earlier language than Linear B. But because these are bureaucratic documents, there is very little that you can, because there's no syntax as such. Maybe one every 40 tablets has got a verb. Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about, for example, the catalog of sheep.
Yeah. Well, if you want to draw similarities, it's possible. But archaeologists are very, very skeptical about drawing parallels with Homer. And the biggest challenge with Homer is the various elements that span from the early Bronze Age, maybe, to the early Iron Age. And so you can't really figure out what this part of the poem comes from. Yeah. Sometimes with archaeology, you can say these burial traditions appear to be early Iron Age, but we cannot be sure because it's Homeric poems, you know.
My question was more, you can see the meter, because the method could be there, and this would be connected with some sort of, structure within,
You can't. It's imagine these as shopping lists. So if you can find the meter in there, it's because you are very good in meter, and not because they were. Yeah. It's not Lucretius. It's yeah. Good. Yeah. Enough. Thank you. Cheers.